Well, hello everybody, and welcome to my show. My name is Jason DaCosta, and this is Consistent Preterism. Today's show is going to be a little choppy. You're going to hear this first portion kind of end, and then there's going to be a point about in the middle that just kind of picks back up again and says, welcome again to my show. And the reason is because I'm driving this morning. It's Tuesday, and I just wanted to do a little brief just touch on a couple quick things and give you guys a little update as to what's going on, and nothing too extravagant, but and then I'm going to attach that to a previously done audio that I did on the passage where Jesus says many will come from the north, south, east, and west and sit in the kingdom, blah blah blah. So don't be alarmed if the recording just kind of starts back up again with another hello, this is Jason in the middle. That's intentional. Excuse me. So just wanted to give you guys a brief update. Things have been crazy busy, like I said before. Don't get alarmed. Don't think I'm jumping off the bridge or anything like that. Just been totally absorbed with work responsibilities and so many different things we're doing. I'm actually going to be out in Canada, Western Canada, the rest of this week, starting tomorrow until Sunday. And just a ton of travel going on, along with other things we're working on. We're doing some new videos for the company that, we send to certain customers and whatnot. And kind of interesting, one of the videos, I should start by saying, maybe about 10 years ago, I met Dr. Paul Nassif at a conference that I did. It was a plastic surgery conference out in Las Vegas, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Paul, but he's on the show Botched. He's the star surgeon, or one of the two main surgeons that are on that show on E called Botched that is on now. And he's also done a lot over the years. He used to be the Extreme Makeover plastic surgeon, and he's basically the Hollywood plastic surgeon. He's in Beverly Hills, yada yada yada. So anyways, this guy comes in and starts a conversation with me, and he was kind of cocky at first, but ended up kind of smoothing it out and had a decent conversation with the guy. He ended up liking the products and ended up getting some. And recently we kind of worked out an arrangement where he would give us an endorsement and whatnot. So I'm working on a lot of that kind of stuff and putting it into different clips and different things that we want to use it for, along with a lot of other things. So just been crazy hectic. So don't worry about anything. I will eventually come back to doing hopefully more regular routine audios. But the reason why I wanted to clip this onto the front of the audio today is because I'm not exactly sure how frequent I'm going to be sharing them in the immediate future. I don't know if I'll even share another one this week. I'm not sure. This could be the only one, but don't get nervous. In other news, I am going on Ryan Provost's YouTube show. He asked me to jump on there and do a little interview where he's going to ask me some questions and just chat a little bit like he did with Bradley and Barris and others. So that's coming up soon. I would guess within the next couple of weeks that should be out. And also Tommy the Strawman Mills, I'm going to be refuting his points. Excuse me. Like I said, I have a trip out to Western Canada this week where I have long flights, and usually that's when I listen to these guys' points and we jot down a few notes and then kind of roll with it. So hopefully that's my plan. That's what I'm going to get around to doing. He did actually comment on a recent video, and he said that his points and his refutation was more directed at Rivers and Corey and their version of I.O., which says that God doesn't care about anyone today, and God doesn't, have relationship with anyone today, and so on and so forth. So he did go ahead and, he laid that foundation down first, which helps because honestly, having listened to some of his points already, I can tell that he uses the argument that God, that these IOers say that God doesn't care about anyone other than Israel. He mentions that a few times from what I've seen so far, and it's just false. I mean, that's why we call him Tommy the Strawman Mills, because we don't say that. That's not in our vocabulary, ever. I don't think I've ever said that. In fact, I've said quite the opposite, although I can't prove how, why, or how he works or acts or what. I do not believe that God just, has abandoned all people and never cared about other people. That's not my position at all. My position is strictly that the salvation narrative in the New Testament, the coming of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the death on the cross, and all of that pertained to that was only related to Israel, just like Jesus said. That is my entire premise. That's my main viewpoint when it comes to the New Testament and who salvation and redemption and everything was for. And I think the Bible, actually I'm positive the Bible affirms that with its exclusive and conclusive points and passages that it makes to say that the gospel ended at the coming and all nations received it by that time. So there is no gospel today. So that's my stance when it comes to the points that Tommy the Straw Man makes about God not caring for people, or when he refers back to Old Testament accounts of God doing nice things for people who are not Israel. I'm not going to get into it because it's just not relevant. Okay, those are details that are not relevant to my point and what I teach. Okay, I've never said that God doesn't care about people. My focus is on salvation and who it was for, and that there is no gospel today because that gospel went to all nations and then the end came. So again, I'll get back to that. If I had to guess, I'd probably hope to get it done and shared within a week and a half or so, if all goes well and I have enough time and I don't fall asleep and drool on myself during these plane rides, which happens quite a bit as well. So you never know, but I am going to attempt to put forth some sort of response to that. In other news, and in most entertaining news, I mean, this is just hilarious. It's just sheer comedy. It's brilliant. And I'm sure many of you who are in the Facebook world already know. Now, you guys know of Rivers of Eden, right? He's the bitter, jealous baby who claims that I learned everything that I know about IO from him and Corey, although, like I've said before, Corey had me blocked on Facebook for 3-4 years prior to me coming to IO. Couldn't see him, never saw anything he shared. We never communicated. We weren't in any of the same groups. We had one interaction about 4 years before I came to the View on my own. And Rivers claims that he and Corey taught me everything I know, even though out of his own mouth he admits that I came to IO through covenant creation, which he firmly denies. So he's all over the place, and he's been caught in more lies than Tiger Woods, right? And so this guy has just been completely bitter and jealous, and throughout the past, 6 to 9 months, he's been unable to get my name out of his mouth. And he consistently bashes me and says I'm a wannabe and says I don't know what I'm talking about. Yet I have countless emails from him that I've shared publicly that show that just about 9 months ago, when he was dying to listen to my next YouTube audio, he was all about it. He was on my jock, as they say, and he really enjoyed and commended me on such clear work and what I'm doing for the IO View. So he obviously knew that A, I did not come to IO through his work or Corey's work back then. That was something he conjured up and lied about when he became bitter. And he obviously, B, agreed with everything that I was saying and also commended me on the clarity that I was bringing forth to the IO position, of which he then changed and said that I don't know what I'm talking about once he became a bitter, jealous baby. So, needless to say, there's been some bad blood between he and I. Well, it just gets better. Now, I've told everybody that this guy is a liar and cannot be trusted. He's been caught in lies. He's been caught deleting comments. He's been caught removing posts. He's been caught doing so many things that it's a wonder that he's even on Facebook anymore and he hasn't just run away and hid. Well, the latest news is I got a message from a woman who's a friend of mine and who's a fellow IOer and all, and she sent me pictures of this famous drummer named Brian Tichy, or Tichy, I don't know how you pronounce it, but this guy apparently was a drummer back in the day for Ozzy Osbourne and Whitesnake or whoever else, I don't know. And it's the same picture that Rivers of Eden's been using all along for his profile pictures, okay? So I was a little confused at first, like, what's going on here? Well, clearly, through some investigative work and through people who have known this buffoon for many decades, Rivers has actually been using false pictures as his profile picture. So he's been using this guy Brian's pictures as his profile pictures and quite creepily, he actually changes those pictures every once in a while and puts a new picture of Brian's face up as if it's his face. And it's just very bizarre. But he's been caught, and sure enough, he is not that guy. He is not Brian Tichy. That guy, I guess, lives in California. People have confirmed that this guy, his real name is Chris Camillo. He is from Minnesota, from what I hear, but who knows, right? This is like a Dateline mystery. You never know. He lives in Minnesota, and they actually surfaced a picture of him, and he looks absolutely nothing like the guy that he's been using in his profile pictures. He is just a regular-looking Minnesota 50-some-odd-year-old white dude with balding, receding hairline. Quite the opposite of the guy with luscious black locks of hair flowing from his head like a rock star that he uses. Maybe he's got a bit of a man crush. But anyways, so yeah, he's been using these pictures and lying about who he is and keeping his identity a secret. And then word got back to me that Barry Isaacs was in communication with him, asking him about it and why did he do it and everything. And this guy Chris lies again and tells Barry that his name is not Chris Camillo and that he only used that name as a fake name when he went to Christian preterist conferences back in the 80s. So here's a guy, super paranoid, with fake pictures, fake names, doesn't let his number, he blocks his number when he calls you. And he's telling Barry that his name is now not Chris Camillo, right? Well, it was funny because right after he said that, Ed Stevens and his wife, I think Beth Stevens, commented and said that years ago in the early 80s, his name is indeed Chris Camillo. He came to the conference and actually showed them pictures of his newborn daughter, and that the picture that was shared of him is in fact him, and his name is Chris Camillo. And then Camillo, I don't know. And then he came back to another conference, and his name was still Chris Camillo. So, in other words, he's been caught again in a lie. He tried to lie and say that his name was not Chris Camillo, and yet innocent people have come forth and said, no, he's lying again, it is. He is Chris Camillo. So this guy just cannot get out of his own way. It's just really, really disturbing and quite pathetic. And it's just par for the course, right? I mean, I've been saying this all along. I've been telling people how big of a liar he is and how he can't be trusted. And I've had a few people who have come back and sort of questioned me on that, like, oh, you can't, say those types of things. You don't know if it's true. No, I do know if it's true. I spoke with this guy on the phone extensively one night about a year ago, and he had one story, and then as soon as he started hating on me 2 months ago, everything changed, and all of a sudden, all of his story changed, and I became someone who sat under his tutelage and under Corey's tutelage and learned everything I know from him, and it's just amazing how much he can lie and be comfortable with that amount of lying. Clearly, he doesn't believe in any type of God or any type of morality, because his lies are just pitiful. But so I just wanted to give you guys the heads up. The profile pictures that you're looking at for Rivers of Eden are not Rivers of Eden. They are his man crush, Brian Tichy, who he probably has a poster of in his room and kisses before he goes to bed each and every night. So that's about all I'm going to say for now, folks. I just wanted to give you all a brief update. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the short audio. It's only 6 or 7 minutes long. I'm going to attach that to the back end of this, and it deals with the many will come from the north, south, east, and west and sit in the kingdom passage from, I think it's Matthew 8, but I could be wrong. But anyways, I hope you all have a great day, and keep your eyes peeled for my response to Tommy the Strawman Mills, and also my interview on Ryan Provost's YouTube channel. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye now. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jason DaCosta, and thank you for joining me on my show called Consistent Preterism. Got a very quick one for you today. It's about Matthew chapter 8, where Jesus says that many will come from the north, south, east, and west and sit down in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And a lot of people like to use this portion, and I'm not going to read it because, again, I'm driving, but they like to use this portion and this little, saying, I guess, from Jesus and say that, look, this is speaking of people today. Many people today are going to come and sit in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob from the north, south, east, and west, right? But they're not understanding, or they're forgetting, or they're not realizing that all the Gentiles came in by the coming, right? So the gospel, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24:14, that this gospel will go to all nations and then the end will come. So the gospel had to go to all nations and then the end would come, right? It had to reach all the nations and all the people whom it was intended for before the end came. In other words, before he came for his saints, right? So is the gospel going to all nations the equivalent of those ones coming from the north, south, east, and west? Of course it is, right? You have the gospel being said to go to all nations before the end by Jesus. And then in Matthew 8, you have Jesus saying that many will come from the north, south, east, and west and sit in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the ones who came from the north, south, east, and west were the ones who got the gospel before the end, who were living out in the nations. It's common sense. In Romans 11, Paul said that the fullness of the Gentiles will come in, and in this way all Israel will be saved. And it'll be at that time that Jacob's Redeemer will come out of Zion, he calls him the deliverer, and turn away ungodliness from Jacob. And he said this would be his covenant with Jacob when he takes away Jacob's sins. So the new covenant was going to be made with Jacob, and all of Jacob was going to be fully saved and fully forgiven by the coming of Jacob's Redeemer. So the point that you really got to understand here is that this idea of those ones coming from the north, south, east, and west being applicable and relevant to people today coming in from all over the world just doesn't work, because the gospel already went to the whole world, right? It had to go to the whole world before the coming. Matthew 24:14, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So the whole world and all nations, in context, of course, we know the gospel didn't go to China, it didn't come to America, it didn't go literally to the whole world before his coming, but it had to go to the known world for the purpose of gathering God's elect, okay? And that had to happen by the time of his coming. So yes, indeed, many did come from the north, south, east, and west. In fact, they came from all over. When James wrote to them, he wrote to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. When Peter wrote to them, he wrote to the elect of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Asia, Cappadocia, Bithynia. These are elect, dispersed Israelites scattered abroad, dispersed out in all the nations, north, south, east, and west. And by the end, they were all in. This is what Paul meant when he said the fullness of the Gentiles will come in, and in this way all Israel will be saved. In Revelation 7, we have the glorious final picture of all the saints standing redeemed, crying out with palm branches, singing a song of salvation before the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders, and saying, salvation belongs to our God. And John says that they came out from the last day's great tribulation. But they were the great multitude from all nations, right? From all nations. And they were singing the redemption song. The same redemption song that Revelation 14 says only the 12 tribes could learn. And that's because the great multitude from all nations was the same group as the 12 tribes scattered abroad. That's exactly who they were. And so this prediction that Jesus makes in the beginning of the gospel going out, saying that many will come from the north, the south, the east, and the west and sit at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom. In other words, most likely referring to the marriage supper. He's referring to the fact that this gospel was going to go out to these nations. It was going to go all abroad. It was urgently going out for the purpose of gathering in the 12 tribes who are scattered abroad. And this is why when Paul is writing to the Romans in Romans chapter 9, he asks, is God also God of the Gentiles? And then he immediately quotes 3 Old Testament passages that are all about Israelites. His first one is Hosea. He says, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, the remnant will be saved. The second one, I think, comes from Isaiah, same sort of idea. about the children of Israel being out in the nations and the remnant saved. And then the last one he quotes is also Isaiah about how if the Lord hadn't left them a remnant, they would have become like Sodom and Gomorrah. In other words, God had left a remnant of them out in the nations. Otherwise, they would have disappeared. So this was all about Israelites. And so this prediction of Jesus in Matthew chapter 8 was totally fulfilled at the end when we see that perfect, complete, full salvation of all the elect standing in heaven, crying out, "Salvation belongs to our God." And they have come in from all nations, and they were the great multitude from all nations, standing redeemed in heaven. And that is exactly what Jesus predicted when he said, "Many will come from the north, the south, the east, and the west, and sit down at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom." That's because that's exactly where the gospel went. It went to the north, to the south, to the east, and the west. And it had to be fully preached by the time of his coming, and then the end would come. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it, folks. I know it was a quick one today. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and we'll be back another day, another time, another place, and another rhyme. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.